and a constitutional expert, Fox News contributor. So, Jonathan, give me your, off the top of your head, where do you think this stands? I mean, in basketball terms, this is March Madness. The 24-second clock is winding down, if that's what college has. He's down, I think he's close to 5 seconds, and the ball is still outside the three-point shooting line. So what do you reckon happens next, right now?
Well, it's hard to gauge because of that posting by the former president. That's going to take some pressure off of the Court of Appeals because they're going to be aware that he's saying that he may have the cash. And so it'll be interesting how that dynamic plays out with the court. This is a lot of money to be able to get his hands on, even for someone who's a billionaire. The question still remains for the Court of Appeals, the underlying decision, and possibly this bond issue. In my view, the penalty that was handed down is absurd. I mean, I don't know anyone that can make sense out of the figure that this judge came up with. He might as well have just said $1 trillion. And by making it a big number, he made it likely that Trump would have to sell some of his real estate. Because you can't use real estate to float a bond of this size. Now, that may have been avoided, but I think that all of the drama going up to the appellate review has got to help Trump to some extent. I think that even people that don't like Trump did not like what they were seeing here. There are very few people that could come up with this amount of cash in this short of time. And if he hadn't, and maybe he still won't, it could put his appeal in danger. So the judge could set a figure so high that unless he sold the property he's trying to protect, he can't get anyone to review the decision.
Yes, well, a famous lawyer I know called it mob justice. I don't want to name any names, but a very famous lawyer who appears on TV quite frequently. Jonathan, what do you think that Mr. Trump's attorneys have already filed an appeal to the New York appellate court?
Well, they've started that process. This is going to move up there. Essentially, the trial court just issued another condition of supervised release, or not supervised release, but supervision for 3 years. What was interesting about the court's decision is that should have been the full extent of the overall decision. That is, if he still believed that in this victimless crime where no one lost a dime, that you couldn't trust the corporation, you could have just kept the corporation under this type of monitoring. You didn't have to impose $1, let alone $500 million worth of penalty on this defendant. And so it just begs the question again of, well, why hit him with this unprecedented penalty? No, absolutely. It seems crazy.
He's got to give up everything he owns just in order to appeal. It sounds very un-American. Jonathan, a technical question. If worst case for Trump or worst case or whatever, if AG Letitia James seizes a property. Now, there's been stories in the paper today, New York Post and elsewhere, that she's got her eye on Mr. Trump's golf club in Westchester County. If she seizes a property, Jonathan Turley, can she sell the property, just sell it off right away?
It's not that easy, and I think that James is going to find out this is far more complex than she's suggesting to New Yorkers. I mean, James hasn't built anything but her career in her life. I mean, this is complex finances, and most of these properties are partnerships. They have leveraged debt. All of that has to be unraveled. So these aren't just this one-to-one Trump versus James type of equation. So in order to seize that property, she's going to be pulled into court. There's going to be challenges. It's not going to happen overnight. Where everyone is celebrating this idea that she's going to padlock Trump Tower, it's not likely to happen, and certainly not likely to remain very long. The other thing is that she could be harming the value of the property that she's trying to seize with some of these actions. I don't think that matters to her, but it might matter to a court.
Yeah, well, it might matter to, anybody else that's been in business or commerce, but that's a separate segment. Jonathan, the Eighth Amendment, as though I have to tell you, but I'm not the lawyer. The Eighth Amendment reads, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. You may recall about a month ago, at the Laura Ingraham Fox town hall with Mr. Trump. He pulled a piece of paper out of his suit coat and read the Eighth Amendment. I think it was about a month ago or so. I must confess, I've been texting him about the Eighth Amendment, and he sent me back this article from an outlet called the Los Angeles Daily News, written by a woman named Susan Shelley. Anyway, the story was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You may know this, maybe you teach. Ruth Bader Ginsburg used the Eighth Amendment to stop a much smaller case in Indiana. Samuel Alito assisted her, and she said that the Eighth Amendment goes all the way back to the Magna Carta, which I just love because I used that as a throwaway in one of these segments the other day. That was 1250 AD, and I know she was right because I was there.
Yes, and we're so grateful for your contribution. But I do think, look, there is an issue here of the Eighth Amendment. There's also an issue of due process, in addition to that line of cases, which is rather thin. So this is going to be new ground for the courts to deal with. So this is sort of unsettled. But there's also the due process question. The Supreme Court has on rare occasions stepped into state cases and said, this is such a sort of over-the-top damage figure that it violates due process. Now, that one of those cases involving BMW involved punitive damages, where the ratio was over 1 to 10 by a considerable margin. So it was well over what they usually deal with. And the court said, look, when it gets to be that large, there's due process questions. New York is unique, I think, in this case, because they have made even the bond confiscatory. So it's not just the damages, but the bond rule that seem to be punitive. It's certainly in the use by James and this judge. So those are going to be viable challenges, and it could go all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah. One last one, Jonathan, because just before the show, we bumped into Shannon Bream up on the 20th floor, and I was asking her about this. She, legal analyst herself, and she covers the Supreme.
Very good lawyer.
Yeah, very good one. So anyway, the point is, I asked her, has Trump already appealed to the Supremes on Eighth Amendment grounds? And she said probably he would wait until it runs through the appellate court appeals in New York before he goes to the Supremes. Does that sound right to you, or might he be already appealing to the Supremes on Eighth Amendment grounds?
I think he'd be wise to go through the appellate court. Right. This is not like jumping a trial court in the federal system or an appellate court. The state system has the primary role here. Just one judge has reviewed this law and made this, in my view, absurd ruling and impose this penalty. I think he'd be wise. He has to have these New York judges take a look at this, and hopefully they will redeem the New York legal system by saying it's not about Trump, it's about us, and this is way over the top.
Yes, sir. Great stuff. The great Jonathan Turley. Thank you ever so much. We appreciate it as always.
Thanks,
all right, folks,
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
It's not about justice. It's not about agenda. It's not about mobilizing people. It's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.